Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your video lesson on solving proportions. After this lesson, you should be able to identify proportional relationships and solve proportions. So, two quantities are proportional if they have a constant rate or ratio. Remember, ratios and rates from before lessons, ratios and rates change or vary in the same way. It means they're proportional. So, for example, if I had 16 cans of dog food for 2 dogs, then I could assume that I had 32 cans for 4 dogs. So they would simplify to be the same rate or ratio. So just like I just said, proportional relationships have the same unit rate when simplified. So proportion is another word. So proportion and proportional, those can be tricky. A proportion is an equation stating that two ratios are equivalent. So once we know it's just the equation portion of saying 1/2 and 3/6 are the same, 8 feet for every 10 seconds and 4 feet for every 5 seconds are the same. Okay? So what we know is, so if I have the following algebraic proportion, A over B and C over D, what that means is that I can multiply each side by the denominators, and they should stay equal when you've done that. These are called cross products. So the cross products of a proportion should be equal, okay? So you can compare unit rate or cross products to identify if something is proportional. A lot of vocab, so kind of reprocess that, think about some examples, and write some things down. So let's try to identify proportional relationships. So remember, non-proportional, if proportional means that ratios are equal, non-proportional would be ratios do not form a proportion and they're not equal, or the cross products are not equal. So we're trying to identify if a carousel makes 4 complete turns after 64 seconds and 5 complete turns after 76 seconds. We want to know if the number of turns made is proportional to the time in seconds. So what we do is we put our seconds, so we're seconds and turns here. We're going to do 64 seconds. We have 2 methods, okay? So one is to compare unit rates. 64 seconds in 4 turns. And we would simplify that, as well as simplify 76 seconds for 5 turns. So when I simplify this, essentially I'm dividing by 4. I'm finding the unit rate, the per one. What I get is that 16 seconds for every 1 turn. If I divide this by 5 to find the unit rate of denominator of 1, what I get is 15 2/10 of a second for every 1 turn. So because these two unit rates are not the same, these are not equal, so they are non-proportional relationship. Another way to check is to compare ratios by comparing the cross products. So what I can do instead is set up both ratios or rates, and so 64 seconds to 4 turns should be the same as 76 seconds to 5 turns. So if I use my cross products, I'm doing 64 times 5 and 76 times 4. And what I get when I do that is 320 should be equal to 304. And that's not true. So therefore, they are non-proportional again. So 2 methods, comparing unit rate or comparing with cross products. So now you try it. A couple options here. So I might do, for this first one, I think I'm going to do compare cross products. So I'm going to do 60 out of 100 voted registered people voted. Is that the same as 84 people voting out of 140 that were registered? So if I do my cross products of 60 times 140 should be equal to 84 times 100. These are both equal to 8,400. So since they are the same, they are equal, these are proportional. This relationship is proportional. So for the next one, I think I'm going to try unit rates. So comparing unit rates. So I'm going to do $12 for 16 yards of fabric compared to $9 for 24 yards of fabric. So remember, I'm trying to find the unit rate. So I divide by the denominator to figure out how much each one is per one, so per yard. So I find out this is 75 cents for 1 yard. Divide by the denominator on the next one. And I find out that that is 375 thousandths, which would be approximately 38 cents per 1 yard. So therefore, those are not equal. So this is a non-proportional relationship. There's two options there. Then there's also just solving a proportion. So this goes into our next second target. Solving the proportion, we're still using our cross products here. So since they should be equal, we can use that. Okay? So what we're going to do is do our cross products. So we're going to do 7 times 21 and 5 times C. So C represents our variable. It represents the unknown number that we're trying to find. So then I get 147. And C we don't know, so this is just 5 times C. We just write them next to each other. Well, 5 times C equals 147, so to undo that, we're going to divide by 5, because then we'll get C alone. Well, 5 divided by 5 is 1, so we just have one single C, which is what we want. And when we divide that, we get 29 and 4/10. So to check for reasonableness, well, we could assume that 20 over 5, we could estimate 21 over 5 is approximately 20 over 5, which is 4. So we can say, okay, 29.4 over 7, it's approximately 28 over 7, which is also 4. So it's a reasonable answer. Another one, and then you can try on your own. So we're going to do our cross products, remember, is equal to 13 times 8. So I get 2.6 times n is equal 13 times 8. Remember, if you struggle with these, you can do 8 times 10 and then 8 times 3 and add them together. We get 104. To undo and get n alone, we're going to divide by what's attached. So we get n is equal to 40. Couple for you to try, and then come back and check. Pause here. Cross products are 16 times 3 and 2 times k. So we get 48 is equal to twice what number? So we divide by 2. 4k is equal to 24. Cross products, 2 times h, 6 times 5. 2 times what number equals 30? So we undo that. H is equal to 15. Last one, 4 times 10, cross products, 2.5 times k. 40 is equal to 2.5 times what number? Divide by 2.5. And I get 16 equals k. Hopefully that went well for you. If not, go back and rewatch what you need. Last little bit, a word problem to help us with real life. So for every 18 people who have a sore throat, there are 2 people who actually have strep throat. If 72 patients have sore throats, how many of these would you expect to have strep throat? So we're going to write and solve a proportion. So we have 2 strep to 18 sore. So if that's true, how many people would have strep, put a variable there, out of the 72 that have a sore throat? So we have 2 over 18 is the same as how many, and you can use x if your s's looks like 5s like mine, out of 72. Cross products. 144 is equal to 18 times what? Divide by 18. And when I do that, I get 8. So 8 people, we could assume. So you could do it that way, or again, compare the unit rates. So 2 out of 18, divide by 2, we get 1 to 9. So we could say about 1/9, and then do 1/9 of 72 is 8. So you can give this one a try, and then we're set to go. So Salvador can run 120 meters in 24 seconds. At this rate, how many seconds will it take him to run? How many seconds, that's what we don't know, to run 300 meters. We set up a proportion. Cross products, 120x is equal to 300 times 24. Then we divide to find out that it could take him 60 seconds. Ta-da! Some fun things, those of you that like algebra, we're getting into it here. And just remember those equivalents and our factors and multiples will help us here. So have a fact chart with you. You're going to do great.